Jordan and Melissa Carter looked like the perfect newlyweds from Dallas, some successful and madly in love, but when their honeymoon in Lombok turned into a nightmare, the paradise they dreamed of became the scene of a deadly secret that money could no longer hide. Jordan and Melissa Carter had everything that looked like a modern fairy tale. Their wedding, held at a sun-drenched Texas vineyard, was the kind that filled social media feeds with envy-white roses, golden lights, and smiling faces. They had met 3 years earlier, at a charity gala in Dallas, where Melissa's laughter and Jordan's calm demeanor seemed like the perfect match. He was a financial advisor who prided himself on discipline and order. She was an interior designer with a flair for beauty and luxury. To the outside world, they were balance personified. But behind the smiles, quiet differences had been growing. Their honeymoon destination, Lombok, was Melissa's choice. She wanted somewhere untouched, yet elegant. Somewhere that promised the kind of pictures that would keep her Instagram followers admiring her life for months. Jordan had hesitated. He preferred something simpler, more budget-friendly, but eventually gave in, as he often did. They landed in Indonesia just as the sun dipped into the horizon, painting the ocean gold. The resort, perched on a cliff overlooking turquoise waters, was a paradise made for lovers. A private infinity pool, fresh orchids in the room, and staff ready to fulfill every request. It was everything Melissa had imagined. For the first 2 days, everything seemed perfect. They explored the beaches, rode scooters through coconut groves, and took photos at every turn. Yet even as they smiled for pictures, something was off in Jordan's eyes. Melissa's energy was constant, ordering new outfits online, booking massages, and insisting on lavish dinners. She signed receipts with careless ease, her hand always reaching for the platinum card Jordan had given her. He said nothing, but each swipe cut deeper into his patience. By the 3rd day, their differences began to show. Melissa spent an entire morning shopping in local markets, buying pearls and silk scarves worth hundreds of dollars. Jordan waited outside under the hot sun, checking their bank app with growing unease. When she finally emerged, arms full of bags, she laughed about how it's only money. That night, Jordan sat alone on the terrace, staring at the waves below. His jaw was tight, his drink untouched. Resort staff noticed the shift. The couple who had arrived hand in hand were now keeping their distance. Melissa lounged by the pool alone, while Jordan took long walks by the beach, his face unreadable. The villa that had once echoed with laughter became silent. Still, Melissa didn't slow down. She booked a private boat tour without consulting him, and tipped staff generously, leaving Jordan humiliated in front of strangers. The night before tragedy struck, a storm rolled over the ocean. Lightning flashed across the sky, and rain pounded against their windows. Witnesses later said they heard something from the Carters' villa, a loud crash, followed by a scream that vanished into the wind. No one investigated then, assuming it was just the storm. By morning, only Jordan would walk out of that villa alive. Melissa Carter, the bright Dallas bride who had dreamed of paradise, would never be seen again. When the sun rose over Lombok the next morning, the resort slowly came to life. Staff prepared breakfast trays, tourists wandered toward the pool, and waves rolled gently against the cliffs. But inside the Carter villa, something felt wrong. Jordan sat alone at a table near the pool, his clothes wrinkled, eyes vacant. When a waiter asked if his wife would be joining him, Jordan muttered that she had gone for an early swim. He spoke softly, avoiding eye contact, his hands trembling slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. Hours passed, yet Melissa didn't return. By noon, the resort staff grew concerned. Melissa's beach towel and sandals were still neatly placed near the villa door, untouched. The front desk called her name several times along the beach before alerting authorities. A search began that stretched across the coastline. Guests watched as lifeguards scanned the water, while police boats circled the nearby cliffs. The sky darkened again that evening when the worst was confirmed. Melissa's body was discovered floating near sharp rocks below the cliff edge behind their villa. Her wedding bracelet was still on her wrist, glinting faintly in the fading light. At first glance, it looked like a tragic accident. The cliffs were slippery after the storm, and tourists occasionally misjudged the drop while trying to take photos. But something about Melissa's injuries didn't add up. The medical examiner noticed deep bruises on her arms, abrasions along her neck, and small cuts on her scalp that didn't match a fall. There were traces of sand beneath her nails, as if she had fought to hold on to something or someone. When police questioned Jordan, his behavior raised more questions. He seemed detached, almost mechanical, answering each inquiry as though rehearsed. He said he and Melissa had dinner early and went to bed before midnight. He claimed he woke up to find her gone, assuming she had gone swimming before sunrise. But investigators soon discovered footage from a security camera showing Jordan walking alone toward the cliffs around midnight, wearing the same clothes he had on that morning. He returned nearly 2 hours later, wet from the knees down. Officers searched the villa for clues. They found shattered glass on the bedroom floor, a broken perfume bottle, and 2 half-empty glasses of wine on the patio. On the nightstand, a hotel receipt showed Melissa had withdrawn several $1,000s in cash from the front desk hours before her death. Yet the money was missing. Jordan's calmness began to look less like grief and more like control. The police noted how he avoided questions about their finances, brushing off inquiries with vague answers. A local investigator later described his demeanor as a man trying to remember which lie he told last. Resort employees came forward saying they'd heard shouting from the villa during the storm, though they couldn't make out the words. As the hours turned to days, suspicion grew heavier. What began as a honeymoon tragedy now looked like a crime. Behind the soft waves and postcard beauty of Lombok, a darker truth was beginning to surface, one that would reveal just how far someone might go when love and money collide. News of Melissa Carter's death traveled quickly from Lombok to Dallas. What had started as a local incident became a global headline. Dallas newlywed dies on honeymoon, under mysterious circumstances. Friends and family were stunned. Melissa's parents refused to believe it was an accident. They described their daughter as cautious, even fearful of deep water, and said she would never have gone swimming alone before sunrise. Her friends flooded social media with posts celebrating her life, while whispers began spreading about Jordan, the quiet, controlled husband who never seemed fully happy in their marriage. Back in Lombok, the investigation intensified. The autopsy revealed a crucial detail. Melissa had suffered blunt force trauma to the back of her head before drowning. The angle and severity of the wound indicated it couldn't have been caused by a fall. She had been struck. The police revisited the Carter villa, this time combing every inch for hidden evidence. They found traces of blood on the patio railing overlooking the beach, small droplets nearly invisible to the naked eye, but clear under forensic light. The railing sat just above the cliff's edge, where Melissa's body had been discovered. As authorities pieced together the timeline, Jordan's story began to crumble. Phone records showed multiple calls and messages between him and a Dallas-based insurance company days before the trip. Investigators soon discovered he had purchased a new life insurance policy for Melissa only 3 weeks before their wedding, one that promised a payout of nearly $500,000 in the event of accidental death. Jordan claimed it was routine financial planning, but the timing was suspicious. Meanwhile, police obtained Melissa's bank statements, which revealed heavy withdrawals in the days leading up to her death. Witnesses confirmed seeing her argue with Jordan about money at dinner the night before the storm. She had accused him of being controlling, while he reportedly complained she was spending recklessly. The tension had been visible to everyone. The more evidence surfaced, the darker the picture became. Jordan had been struggling financially for months, secretly drowning in debt from failed investments and credit card bills. His polished image as a successful advisor was collapsing. The honeymoon, once meant to show stability and love, had turned into an escape, one that ended fatally. Interpol joined the case to monitor Jordan's financial activity across borders. On the morning after Melissa's death, investigators found that he had transferred a large amount of money equal to the missing cash Melissa withdrew to an offshore account under a different name. When questioned, he denied knowledge of the transaction, claiming his online accounts had been hacked. The excuse sounded weak. Reporters swarmed the resort, tourists fled, and locals whispered about the cursed couple from America. Jordan was summoned daily for questioning but never detained until new evidence arrived. A hotel staff member admitted seeing him near the cliff that night, drenched and pacing, muttering to himself. That testimony, combined with the physical evidence, shifted the case from an accident to a probable murder. Jordan Carter, once seen as a grieving husband, was now the prime suspect in his wife's death. Jordan's arrest shocked both Lombok and Dallas. Images of him being led from the resort in handcuffs filled international news feeds. He looked disheveled, his once neatly styled hair matted, his face expressionless. He claimed innocence as cameras flashed, insisting that Melissa's death was a tragic accident. But behind the courtroom doors, prosecutors were confident they could prove otherwise. The trial began in the small, crowded Mataram courthouse, with dozens of reporters, locals, and tourists waiting outside each day for updates. The prosecution presented their case meticulously. They showed the insurance policy taken out weeks before the wedding, the suspicious bank transfer, and forensic evidence from the villa's patio railing where Melissa's blood had been found. They painted Jordan as a man under financial strain, desperate to maintain a lifestyle he could no longer afford. Witnesses described the couple's arguments about money and the growing distance between them during the honeymoon. Resort employees testified that they had heard a loud crash and muffled shouting on the night of the storm. Jordan's defense team argued passionately that Melissa's death was an accident caused by the slippery cliffs and rough waves. They portrayed Jordan as a loving husband, devastated by the loss of his wife. The bruises on Melissa's arms, they said, were caused by her fall and attempts to grasp at rocks before drowning. The blood on the railing, they claimed, could have come from her injury as she slipped. Without direct eyewitnesses, it seemed the case could go either way. Then came the unexpected breakthrough. A local fisherman testified that on the night of the storm, he had seen a man near the cliffs pushing what appeared to be a large object into the sea. Though it was dark, the fisherman described the man's build and clothing details that matched Jordan. Authorities ordered another search of the nearby waters. Divers found a waterproof pouch wedged between rocks beneath the cliffs. Inside were Melissa's missing jewelry pieces, her passport, and the cash she had withdrawn the day before her death. The discovery sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Jordan's demeanor changed after that. The calm confidence he had maintained began to unravel. He appeared pale and restless, often staring blankly as testimonies unfolded. The prosecutor pressed harder, presenting digital evidence of his late-night internet searches for accidental death insurance payout and how to transfer funds abroad. The picture of a premeditated crime became undeniable. On the 12th day of the trial, Jordan finally spoke. His voice cracked as he admitted they had argued violently that night. He claimed Melissa had insulted him, calling him a failure, and in a moment of rage, he pushed her. She struck her head and fell unconscious. Panicked, he dragged her to the cliff's edge and let the tide carry her away, hoping it would look like an accident. His confession silenced the courtroom. When the judge delivered the verdict, the atmosphere was heavy. Jordan Carter was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The honeymoon that began in paradise had ended in ruin, its beauty now tainted by betrayal and death. The verdict marked the end of the courtroom drama, but not the end of the story. Jordan Carter's sentencing made international headlines. He was sent to serve a life sentence in an Indonesian prison known for its harsh conditions: crumbling walls, humid air, and a silence that weighed heavily on the inmates. The same man who once wore tailored suits and managed wealthy clients was now reduced to a number behind bars. His days were filled with monotony: cold rice, manual labor, and endless time to think about what he had done. Back in Dallas, Melissa's death left a hole that could never be filled. Her parents brought her body home after weeks of paperwork and formalities. Her funeral took place under a pale gray sky, attended by friends, relatives, and strangers who had followed the case. White lilies surrounded her casket, and photographs from her wedding rested near the altar. Her family spoke about her love for travel, her generosity, and how she dreamed of opening her own design studio. Those who knew her best could not reconcile the woman full of life with the way she had died abandoned and betrayed in a foreign land by the man she trusted most. As the months passed, the media began to lose interest, but the scars of the tragedy remained. Melissa's parents filed a lawsuit to reclaim the life insurance money that Jordan had fraudulently set up in his name. The company froze the payout after the conviction, preventing him from gaining a single dollar. Every legal document and every headline reminded the world of how greed had turned love into destruction. Inside prison, Jordan's life became a daily struggle. He avoided other inmates, spending most of his time in isolation. Some said he kept a photograph of Melissa hidden in a worn notebook. Others claimed he talked to himself at night, whispering apologies that no one would ever hear. The man who had once prided himself on control had lost everything: his freedom, his wealth, his reputation, and the one person he claimed to love. 6 months after his sentencing, an investigative journalist from Dallas traveled to Indonesia to document the aftermath. Through interviews with police and lawyers, the journalists uncovered disturbing details that had been overlooked during the trial. It turned out that Jordan had a history of manipulative financial behavior. 2 of his past relationships had ended abruptly after he convinced his partners to invest in ventures that never existed. Both women described him as charming but controlling, always keeping tight control over money and decisions. When investigators dug deeper, they found that he had taken out smaller insurance policies on those partners too, though none had died or been harmed. The revelation painted a chilling pattern. Melissa's death might not have been an impulsive act of anger, but the final step in a carefully constructed plan. When this new report aired on American television, it reignited public outrage. Viewers flooded online forums with disbelief and anger. Commentators called Jordan the groom of greed, while true crime documentaries began dissecting every detail of the case. Psychologists analyzed his behavior, describing him as a man whose obsession with control and image had destroyed his ability to love genuinely. Meanwhile, Melissa's parents turned their grief into purpose. They launched a foundation in her name, helping women in financially abusive relationships recognize early signs of manipulation. Their efforts inspired many, and every year on her birthday, they released white balloons at the park where she used to spend her afternoons sketching. 2 years later, the Indonesian prison reported that Jordan had been hospitalized after a violent altercation with another inmate. Rumors spread that he rarely spoke anymore, spending his days staring through the small barred window of his cell, mumbling about the ocean. Some said he still dreamt of the cliffs of Lombok, where everything had ended. The resort where the tragedy occurred eventually closed the villa where the Carters had stayed. Guests had complained of strange noises: footsteps on the terrace, faint sobs at night, and the sound of glass breaking when no one was inside. Locals began calling it the Villa of the Bride, and for years, it stood empty, a haunting reminder of what had happened there. In Dallas, the story of Jordan and Melissa faded into the long list of tragic love stories that ended in blood and betrayal. Yet, for those who remembered, it served as a chilling reminder of how perfection on the outside could hide chaos within. Melissa's friends often revisited her social media page, where her last post still read, "Forever starts here." The photo showed her smiling under the Lombok sun, her wedding ring glinting. No one knew that her forever would last only a few days. The case left behind a single lingering question: how could something as beautiful as love twist into something so deadly? The answer, perhaps, lay not in the cliffs of Lombok or the courtroom in Mat, But in the silent, invisible spaces between trust and control, between affection and possession, and in those spaces, the story of Melissa Carter would forever remain a warning whispered through time, carried by the sound of the sea, where paradise became her grave.